The single dad had learned to stretch silence the way others stretched money. He sat on the cracked concrete steps outside the closed bakery, shoulders hunched against the evening chill, his daughter asleep against his shoulder like a promise he had to keep no matter what. Her breath tickled his neck, warm and rhythmic, and he stayed very still so he wouldn't wake her. In his lap rested a thin paper bag stamped with faded red ink, expired, not for sale. The owner had slid it across the counter with a look that said don't thank me, but he had anyway. Twice. Gratitude, he'd learned, cost nothing and still felt like wealth. The streets smelled like old sugar and dust. Neon flickered from the convenience store across the way, buzzing like an insect trapped in glass. He watched the light blink on and off and counted the seconds between flashes, the way he used to count coins. He did that now too, without meaning to. How many hours until morning? How many steps to the shelter? How many pieces the loaf could be broken into so no one would go to sleep hungry? He tipped the bag open just enough to peek. The loaf was pale and stiff at the ends, softer in the middle where it still gave under a thumb. He tore off a small piece and tucked it into his pocket for later. Insurance. He hated that word now, hated how it had shrunk to mean a bite saved for when the night gets long. His daughter stirred, making a small sound, and he felt the old spike of fear. He adjusted his jacket around her, whispering nonsense, promises about pancakes, about parks, until her breathing settled again. He'd told himself he wouldn't cry anymore. Tears didn't feed anyone. But sometimes his eyes burned anyway, and he blamed the wind. Footsteps scuffed the pavement. He looked up, ready to guard what little he had, and saw a girl standing a few paces away. She couldn't have been much older than he was when the world first taught him how sharp it could be. Her jacket was thin, the zipper broken, and her hair was pulled back with care that felt deliberate, like she wanted to look put together for someone who might be watching. She held a boy's hand, smaller, rounder-cheeked, eyes darting to the bag like it was a lighthouse. She didn't rush. She didn't hover. She stood where he could see her and waited until he met her eyes. There was a steadiness there that made his chest ache. Adults learned that look after years. Children wore it like armor only when they had to. My child hasn't eaten anything, she said, voice barely louder than the street's hum. She nodded at the boy, who squeezed her hand tighter. Can you share expired bread? The words landed softly and hard at the same time. He felt a reflexive tightening in his grip on the bag, shame flaring hot and quick. He hated that reaction, hated how scarcity taught you to clutch. He hated that he understood it. He glanced at his daughter, asleep and unaware, and thought of the way hunger hollowed out even the loudest joys. He didn't answer right away. He opened the bag slowly, the paper crackling too loud in the quiet, and looked at the loaf again as if it might tell him what to do. He imagined the slices, one for his daughter when she woke, one for himself if the night dragged on, one for the morning he wasn't sure would be kind. He imagined the boy's mouth moving too fast, afraid the food might disappear if he didn't hurry. He imagined the girl pretending she wasn't hungry so the smaller one could eat. He broke the loaf cleanly down the middle. The sound was dull, final. He handed one half to the girl, careful not to brush her fingers. Here, he said. His voice sounded rough to his own ears. He tore his half into two uneven pieces and set one back in the bag, the other on his knee. Sit, he added, gesturing to the step beside him. It felt important to say it like an invitation, not a command. She hesitated only a second before sitting a little distance away, close enough to share warmth, far enough to respect space. The boy crouched between them, eyes wide, then accepted the bread with both hands like it was something precious. He ate like he was afraid it might vanish, fast at first, then slower, savoring the last bites, crumbs dusting his chin. The girl watched him, her jaw tight, and only took a small piece when he pushed some toward her. She thanked him quietly, twice, and he realized he'd done the same earlier at the counter. Gratitude echoing gratitude. The dad watched, heart pinched tight. He remembered the first time he'd fed his daughter solid food, the way she'd smeared it everywhere and laughed like the world was a generous place. He remembered thinking then that love could make anything enough. He still believed it, mostly. It just took more work now. A bus hissed to a stop down the block, doors opening with a sigh like relief. Someone laughed somewhere, too loud and too far away. The city kept breathing. He broke his peace again and offered a corner to the girl. She shook her head at first, then took it when he insisted, eyes dropping to the ground. He wanted to tell her it was okay to take. He wanted to tell her it didn't make her weak. He didn't know how without sounding like a lie. They ate in companionable quiet. When his daughter stirred again, he fed her a few soft bites, her eyes fluttering open just long enough to smile before closing again. The girl watched that too, something easing in her face. The boy leaned against her leg, sleep tugging at him now that his belly wasn't empty. When the bread was gone, the dad folded the bag carefully, smoothing the creases like it mattered. The girl stood, pulling the boy up with her. She paused, then reached into her pocket and held out a small plastic spoon, bent at the handle. For later, she said, uncertain. He shook his head gently, smiling despite himself. She nodded, understanding, and slipped it back. Tomorrow, she said, pointing down the street with her chin. The soup truck comes. He nodded. He didn't promise he'd be there, promises were heavy, but he hoped. As they walked away, the boy turned and waved with a sticky hand. The dad waved back, feeling something loosen in his chest. He gathered his daughter closer, the night still cold, the future still uncertain, but the silence around him felt different now. Not empty. Just waiting. The next evening arrived with a different kind of weight. The air felt fuller, like it was carrying news. The single dad walked the same route with his daughter on his shoulders, her hands tangled in his hair, tugging gently whenever she spotted something interesting, a stray cat, a shiny bottle cap, the glow of the traffic lights. She hummed to herself, a made-up tune that rose and fell with her mood. He let it guide his steps. They could have gone straight to the shelter. He'd told himself that would be the practical choice. But practicality had a way of shrinking the world, and hope, he'd learned, needed room. So he followed the memory of the girl's pointed chin, the direction she'd given as if it were a map drawn in trust. They heard the soup truck before they saw it, the low rumble of the engine, the clatter of metal lids, voices overlapping in a careful dance of order and hunger. Steam drifted into the evening, carrying the smell of broth and spices that made his stomach tighten. His daughter squealed softly and clapped, and he laughed despite himself. It felt good to arrive somewhere with sound. The line was longer than he expected, but it moved with purpose. People stood close without crowding, an unspoken agreement to make space. He shifted his daughter down and set her on his hip. She waved at strangers like they were old friends. Some waved back. One woman slipped her a napkin folded into the shape of a bird. The girl pressed it to her chest like a treasure. Then he saw her, the girl from the night before, standing near the truck, sleeves pushed up, hair tied back tighter than before. She held a ladle with confidence, her movements practiced, careful not to spill. The boy was there too, passing spoons from a crate, counting under his breath as if numbers were a spell that kept things fair. They looked steadier. Not fixed. But steadier. She noticed him and her face lit up in surprise, a smile that reached her eyes and stayed there. You came, she said when it was their turn, like it mattered. He nodded, suddenly shy. We were nearby, he said, which felt close enough to the truth. His daughter leaned forward, peering into the pot, nose wrinkling with delight. Soup, the girl explained to her, solemn and proud. She poured carefully, filling the bowls without sloshing. The boy handed over spoons like he was knighted for the task. The dad murmured thanks, and this time the words didn't feel like a debt. They sat together on overturned crates near the curb. The soup was hot and simple and exactly what it promised to be. His daughter blew on it with exaggerated care, then giggled when steam puffed back at her. He watched her eat, watched the way the girl kept an eye on the boy, watched the way the boy kept an eye on the spoons. Systems of care, all around them. I'm Mara, the girl said after a while, wiping her hands on a towel. This is Eli. The boy looked up at his name and grinned, missing a tooth. He stopped, surprised at how long it had been since he'd said his own name out loud to someone new. He said it anyway. His daughter chimed in with hers, louder, as if volume could make it official. Mara laughed. When the